You didn't expose them, you didn't confront them, and you didn't make any dramatic move that would normally trigger a reaction. Yet something shifted the moment you understood what was really happening beneath the surface. And that shift has created a kind of pressure they cannot seem to escape from. Because awareness, real awareness, doesn't need to announce itself to be felt. It changes the energy of every interaction, every silence, every glance. And now they are responding to something you never even said out loud. And that is what makes this moment so powerful. Because what is unfolding around you is not the result of your actions. It is the result of your clarity. And clarity has a way of exposing instability in others without needing to force anything into the light. And this is why their behavior has started to change in ways that even they may not fully understand. They are speaking more than necessary, reacting faster than usual, trying to control conversations, trying to manage how they are perceived. And all of it points to one thing. They feel the shift. They feel that something is different, that something is no longer hidden the way it used to be. And even though you have remained calm, composed, and mostly silent, your presence now carries a different weight, one that reflects awareness rather than uncertainty. And this is what is unsettling them the most. Because they were comfortable when things were unclear, when confusion allowed them to operate without being questioned. But now that clarity exists, even quietly, it creates a tension they cannot control. And what you are witnessing is not random behavior. It is the beginning of people revealing themselves under pressure. Not because you forced it, but because truth, once recognized, has a way of surfacing everything that was built on illusion. And the more grounded you remain in what you know, the more everything around you will continue to unfold without you needing to intervene. And as you trace everything back to where it truly began, you realize that it did not start with confrontation. It did not start with evidence. And it certainly did not start with anything obvious or dramatic. It began with a moment so subtle that anyone not paying attention would have missed it entirely. A quiet shift in your perception, where something that once felt normal suddenly felt inconsistent, where something that once made sense no longer aligned the way it used to. And at first, you may have questioned it. You may have wondered if you were overthinking, if you were reading too much into small details, if you were allowing your mind to create patterns where none existed. But the more you observed, the more those patterns repeated themselves. Not loudly, not in ways that could be easily pointed out, but in small, consistent signals that began to build a picture you could no longer ignore. And this is where your awareness started to sharpen. Not because you were searching for something to find, but because something within you recognized that what you were seeing mattered, that it required attention, that it was not something to dismiss or explain away. And this is often how truth begins to reveal itself, not as a sudden revelation, but as a gradual alignment of details that, when seen together, create a clarity that cannot be undone. And once that clarity forms, there is no returning to the previous state of not knowing. Because even if you try to ignore it, even if you attempt to rationalize it, even if you give others the benefit of the doubt, the awareness remains. It stays with you. It reshapes how you interpret everything that follows. And this is exactly what happened. You reached a point where the pieces connected in a way that made it impossible to continue seeing things the same way. And that moment, that quiet internal recognition, is what changed everything. Not externally at first, but internally, in a way that would eventually influence everything else. And this is what people often fail to understand. They think awareness is something that needs to be proven, something that needs to be expressed, something that needs to be validated by others. But in reality, true awareness is self-contained. It does not require external confirmation to exist. It simply requires you to acknowledge it. And once you do, it begins to guide your perception, your reactions, your decisions, even if you are not consciously trying to change anything. And this is why your behavior may not have shifted dramatically in that moment. You did not suddenly confront anyone. You did not immediately act on what you noticed. You did not create a scene or demand answers. Instead, you did something far more powerful. You paid attention. You allowed yourself to observe without interfering. You gave yourself space to understand rather than react. And that decision is what gave you an advantage. Because while others operate on impulse, reacting to surface-level situations, you began to operate on insight, responding to what was beneath the surface. And this difference in approach is what sets you apart. Because it allows you to gather information that others overlook. It allows you to see connections that others miss. It allows you to understand dynamics that are not immediately visible. And over time, this understanding becomes more refined, more precise, more accurate. And as it does, your confidence in what you know begins to grow. Not in a loud or aggressive way, but in a quiet certainty that does not need to be announced. And this is where the shift becomes noticeable. Not because you are trying to signal anything, but because your presence begins to reflect that certainty. Your reactions become more measured. Your engagement becomes more intentional. Your silence becomes more meaningful. And people begin to sense that something is different. Even if they cannot identify exactly what it is, they feel that you are not interacting with them in the same way. That you are no longer operating from the same level of assumption or trust. And this creates a subtle tension. Because when someone realizes that they are no longer being perceived in the same way, it disrupts the dynamic they were comfortable with. It removes the layer of invisibility they relied on. And this is where their behavior begins to shift. Not because you have said anything, but because your awareness has changed the environment. It has altered the space in which the interaction takes place. And this is something most people are not prepared for. Because they are used to controlling how they are perceived. They are used to managing impressions. They are used to operating within a framework where their actions go unquestioned. But when that framework is disrupted, even silently, it creates pressure. And that pressure begins to reveal things that were previously hidden. And this is why the moment you noticed everything shift is so important. Because it marks the point where you moved from being part of the dynamic to being aware of it. From being influenced by it to understanding it. From reacting within it to observing it. And that shift is what gives you control. Not control over others, but control over yourself. Over how you interpret situations, over how you respond to them, over how you position yourself moving forward. And this is where your mad heart begins to show its true strength. Because it is not just about resilience or endurance, it is about awareness, about the ability to see clearly even when things are designed to appear confusing, about the ability to remain grounded even when others are operating from instability. And this ability is not something that can be easily challenged, because it is based on what you have observed, what you have experienced, what you have come to understand through your own perception. And as you continue to trust this awareness, as you continue to refine it, to pay attention to it, to learn from it, it becomes one of your most valuable tools, something that allows you to navigate situations with a level of clarity that others may not have. something that allows you to make decisions that are aligned with what is actually happening, rather than what appears to be happening. And this is where your advantage becomes even more evident. Because while others are still trying to maintain illusions, still trying to control narratives, still trying to operate within patterns that are no longer sustainable, you are already moving beyond that. You are already seeing what is real, what is consistent, what is true. And that perspective changes everything. It changes how you engage, how you respond, how you move forward. And as this continues to unfold, you begin to realize that the moment you noticed everything shift was not just a moment of awareness. It was a turning point. A point where you stepped into a different level of understanding, a different level of perception, a different level of control. And from that point on, nothing could return to the way it was before. Not because the external situation changed immediately, but because you did. And once you change the way you see things, the way you understand things, the way you respond to things, everything else eventually follows. And this is why that moment matters. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was obvious, but because it was real. It was the moment where you began to see clearly. And once you see clearly, everything else begins to reveal itself. Step by step, without force, without confrontation, without the need to prove anything. And that is where your true power begins. Not in what you say, not in what you do, but in what you understand, and how you choose to move with that understanding. And as that awareness settled within you, and began to shape how you perceived everything around you, there came a critical moment where you had a choice. A choice that most people do not even recognize they are making, because it happens so quickly and so automatically that it feels like instinct. The choice between reacting immediately or holding your position. Between expressing what you know or allowing it to unfold on its own. And this is where your path separated itself from the predictable pattern that most people follow. Because instead of confronting, instead of questioning, instead of trying to force clarity through conversation or emotion, you chose something far more difficult and far more powerful. You chose silence. Not as avoidance, not as fear, but as strategy, as awareness in motion, as a deliberate decision to observe rather than interfere. And this decision is often misunderstood, because silence is commonly associated with passivity, with uncertainty, with a lack of confidence. But in your case, it was the opposite. It was control. It was discipline. It was a recognition that not every truth needs to be spoken immediately in order to be effective. And this is where your mad heart reveals a deeper level of intelligence, because it understands that timing matters, that observation can reveal more than confrontation, that allowing people to move without interference often exposes more than direct questioning ever could. And so you remained composed. You held your position. You allowed the situation to continue without forcing it into the light. And in doing so, you created a space where things could reveal themselves naturally. And this is where the dynamic began to shift in ways that were not immediately obvious, but became more apparent over time. Because when you remove reaction from a situation that expects it, you disrupt the pattern. You create uncertainty for those who are used to predictable responses. And this uncertainty is what begins to generate pressure. Because people who rely on control, on managing perception, on maintaining a certain narrative, depend on others reacting in expected ways. They depend on confrontation, on emotional responses, on visible reactions that they can then respond to, adjust to, manipulate if necessary. But when that reaction does not come, when the expected response is replaced with silence, with observation, with composure. It creates a gap, a space where they are no longer able to predict the outcome. And that unpredictability is what unsettles them. Because now they are left to interpret your silence, to guess what you know, to wonder how much you understand. And in that process, they begin to reveal more than they intend to. Because uncertainty often leads to overcompensation, to behaviors that are meant to regain control, but end up exposing underlying intentions. And this is where your decision to remain silent becomes more powerful than any confrontation could have been. Because instead of limiting the situation to a single interaction, a single exchange of words, you allowed it to unfold over time, to expand, to reveal layers that would have remained hidden if you had reacted immediately. And this unfolding is where clarity deepens, because it provides context. It shows patterns. It highlights consistencies and inconsistencies that cannot be explained away as isolated incidents. And as you continue to observe, your understanding becomes more complete, more grounded, more aligned with what is actually happening, rather than what appears to be happening on the surface. And this is where your confidence begins to grow. Not from external validation, not from someone confirming what you already sense, but from your own observation, from your own ability to see, to interpret, to understand. And this internal confidence is what strengthens your position, because it allows you to remain steady, even when the situation becomes more complex, even when others begin to react, to shift, to behave in ways that might have previously triggered a response from you. And this is where your discipline is tested. Because maintaining silence is not always easy. It requires you to resist the urge to clarify, to explain, to confront, to correct. It requires you to trust that what you are observing will continue to reveal itself without your intervention. And this trust is not blind. It is built on what you have already seen, on the patterns you have already recognized, on the understanding you have already developed. And as you continue to hold your position, something interesting begins to happen. The pressure that was once internal begins to shift outward. Because now it is not you who is questioning, it is them. It is not you who is trying to understand, it is them. And this reversal changes the dynamic completely, because it places them in a position where they are no longer in control of how they are perceived, where they are no longer certain of how their actions are being interpreted. And this uncertainty leads to behavior that is often more revealing than anything you could have uncovered through direct confrontation. And this is where your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back to them their own actions, their own inconsistencies, their own intentions. And this reflection is what creates discomfort, because it removes the layer of control they once had. It forces them to face the possibility that what they thought was hidden is no longer hidden. And as this discomfort grows, their behavior begins to change in ways that confirm what you already know. They may become more defensive, more reactive, more careful in some moments and less controlled in others. And each of these shifts provides more information, more clarity, more confirmation. And this is why your decision to remain silent is not passive. It is active in a different way. It is a form of engagement that does not rely on words, that does not rely on direct interaction, but instead relies on observation, on awareness, on the ability to allow situations to unfold without interference. And this approach requires patience. It requires discipline. It requires a level of control that most people do not develop, because it goes against the natural impulse to react, to respond, to address things immediately. But you have learned that not everything needs to be addressed in the moment, that sometimes the most effective way to understand a situation is to give it space, to allow it to reveal itself fully. And this understanding is what gives you an advantage, because it allows you to see beyond the immediate, beyond the surface, beyond the initial presentation of things. And as you continue to move in this way, you begin to realize that your silence is not just a response. It is a position. It is a way of navigating situations that prioritizes clarity over immediacy, understanding over reaction. And this position is what allows you to remain grounded even when others are not. It is what allows you to maintain control over your own actions, your own responses, your own direction. And this control is what ultimately shapes the outcome. Because while others are reacting to what they think is happening, you are responding to what you know is happening. And that difference is what defines your path, what sets your experience apart, what allows you to move forward with a level of awareness and confidence that is not dependent on external validation, but is rooted in your own understanding, your own observation, your own ability to see clearly. And as this continues to unfold, as the situation continues to reveal itself, you begin to see the true value of the choice you made. Not to react, not to confront, but to remain silent, to observe, to understand. Because in that silence, you gain something far more valuable than a temporary resolution. You gained clarity. You gained control. You gained a deeper understanding of the dynamics at play. And that understanding is what allows you to move forward with intention, with awareness, with a level of confidence that cannot be easily shaken. Because it is built on what you have seen, what you have understood, and how you have chosen to respond to it. And as you continue to hold that position of silence and observation, something even more revealing begins to unfold. Something that does not require confirmation, does not require evidence in the traditional sense, because it is felt long before it is ever proven. And that is the undeniable shift in how they respond to you. A shift that signals one clear truth. They can feel that you know, even if you have not said a single word about it, even if you have not confronted them, even if you have given them no direct indication of what you have understood. There is something in your presence, something in your energy, something in the way you now engage that communicates awareness. And that awareness creates a pressure they cannot ignore. Because people who rely on hidden dynamics, on unspoken advantages, on operating within spaces where they believe they are not being fully seen, are highly sensitive to any change in perception. And when that perception shifts, even subtly, they feel it. Not always consciously, not always in a way they can articulate, but in a way that influences their behavior, their tone, their decisions. And this is where your mad heart begins to demonstrate another level of its power. Because it is no longer just about what you understand internally. It is about how that understanding now shapes the space around you, how it influences interactions without you needing to control them. And this is what makes your position so unique, because you are not forcing anything to happen. You are not trying to expose, to prove, or to validate what you know. You are simply holding your awareness, allowing it to exist, allowing it to guide you. And in doing so, you create an environment where others begin to reveal themselves through their own reactions. And this is where things become even more interesting. Because the moment someone feels seen, truly seen, especially in ways they are not prepared for, their behavior begins to change. Sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes in more obvious ways, but always in ways that reflect the internal pressure they are experiencing. And this pressure does not come from you directly. It comes from their own awareness of your awareness. From the realization that the space they once operated in without question is no longer the same. And this is where their responses begin to give you more information than any direct confrontation ever could. Because instead of carefully constructed answers, instead of controlled narratives, you begin to see unfiltered reactions, moments where their composure slips, where their words do not align, where their actions contradict themselves. And each of these moments adds another layer to your understanding, another confirmation of what you have already sensed. And this is why your position remains so powerful, because you are not relying on what they say, you are observing what they do. You are paying attention to patterns rather than isolated incidents. You are allowing their behavior to speak for itself. And over time, this creates a level of clarity that is undeniable. Not because it has been proven externally, but because it has been consistently revealed through observation. And this is where your confidence continues to grow. Not in a way that needs to be expressed outwardly, but in a way that stabilizes your internal state, that reinforces your understanding, that allows you to move forward without hesitation, without doubt, without the need to seek validation from others. And this internal stability is what further influences how they respond to you. Because now, your presence is not just aware, it is grounded, it is steady. It is no longer searching for answers, it already holds them. And that certainty is what creates even more pressure. Because uncertainty can be managed, it can be manipulated, it can be redirected. But certainty, especially when it is silent and unshaken, is much more difficult to control. And this is where their behavior may begin to escalate. Not necessarily in obvious or dramatic ways, but in subtle shifts that reveal discomfort, attempts to regain control, efforts to test whether your awareness is as deep as it seems. And this is where your discipline continues to matter. Because as these shifts occur, there may be moments where you feel the urge to respond, to clarify, to confirm, to engage more directly. But maintaining your position, maintaining your awareness without reacting impulsively, is what allows the situation to continue revealing itself. Because the moment you step into reaction, the dynamic changes. It becomes something that can be managed, something that can be redirected. But as long as you remain in observation, as long as you allow your awareness to guide you without forcing action, you retain the advantage. You retain the clarity. You retain the ability to see beyond what is being presented. And this is where your growth becomes even more evident. Because you are no longer operating from a place of needing to prove what you know. You are operating from a place of trusting it, of allowing it to inform your decisions, of using it to navigate the situation in a way that aligns with your understanding, rather than reacting to surface-level behaviors. And this is what separates you from those who are still caught in the dynamic. Because while they are reacting to what is happening moment by moment, you are seeing the broader pattern. You are understanding the underlying structure. You are recognizing how each piece connects to the larger picture. And this perspective is what gives you control. Not control over others, but control over your own movement, your own direction, your own response. And as this continues to unfold, as their behavior continues to reflect the pressure they are experiencing, you begin to see that what once felt uncertain is now becoming clear. What once felt like intuition is now being confirmed through observation. And this confirmation does not need to be spoken. It does not need to be validated externally. It exists in the consistency of what you are seeing, in the alignment of what you have understood with what is being revealed. And this is where your mad heart becomes not just a source of resilience or awareness, but a source of quiet authority. Because it allows you to move through the situation with a level of confidence that does not rely on external approval, that does not require confrontation, that does not depend on others acknowledging what you know. It simply exists as part of who you are, as part of how you engage with the world. And this is what makes your presence so impactful. Because it operates beyond words, beyond actions, beyond anything that can be easily defined. It is felt. It is recognized. It influences the space around you in ways that are subtle yet undeniable. And as you continue to trust this, to refine it, to move with it, you will find that you do not need to force clarity. You do not need to chase answers. You do not need to prove anything. Because everything you need to understand will continue to reveal itself, naturally, consistently, and in alignment with the awareness you have already developed. And that is where your true strength lies. Not in what you say, not in what you do, but in what you know and how you choose to move with that knowledge. And as this silent awareness continues to shape the space around you and influence how others respond, something even more telling begins to unfold. Not as a sudden collapse, not as an obvious exposure, but as a gradual breakdown in the consistency of their behavior. Because when someone is operating under pressure, especially the kind of pressure that comes from feeling seen without knowing exactly how much has been understood, their ability to maintain control begins to weaken. And this is where the first visible cracks begin to appear. Not in ways that are dramatic enough to draw immediate attention from everyone, but in subtle inconsistencies that stand out to you because you are already observing with a heightened level of awareness. And this is where your mad heart continues to demonstrate its depth. Because it is not just about recognizing the truth. It is about watching how that truth begins to surface through behavior that can no longer be perfectly managed. And this is often how breakdown begins. Not with a single mistake, but with a series of small misalignments. Moments where words do not fully match actions, where explanations become slightly excessive, where reactions seem just a bit too strong for the situation. And at first, these moments might seem insignificant when viewed individually. But when seen as part of a pattern, they begin to reveal something much larger, something that cannot be easily dismissed as coincidence or misunderstanding. And this is where your patience continues to serve you. Because instead of reacting to each individual inconsistency, instead of addressing each moment as it arises, you allow the pattern to develop. You allow the repetition to confirm what you are seeing. And in doing so, you gain a level of clarity that is far more stable and far more accurate than anything that could have been achieved through immediate reaction. And this is where the pressure they are experiencing begins to intensify. Because maintaining a controlled narrative requires consistency. It requires alignment. It requires the ability to manage not just what is said, but how it is said, when it is said, and how it is supported by action. And under pressure, that level of control becomes increasingly difficult to sustain, especially when the person they are interacting with is no longer responding in predictable ways. And this is where your silence, your composure, your awareness continue to disrupt the dynamic, because it removes the feedback they rely on to adjust their behavior. It removes the cues they use to maintain control. And as a result, they begin to overcompensate, to fill the space with unnecessary explanations, to anticipate questions that have not been asked, to justify actions that have not been challenged. And each of these responses, while intended to regain control, actually contributes to the breakdown, because it introduces more variables, more inconsistencies, more opportunities for misalignment. And this is where your role remains the same. You continue to observe, to process, to understand, without stepping into reaction, without interrupting the unfolding. And this consistency in your approach is what allows the situation to continue revealing itself. Because the more you remain grounded, the more their behavior continues to shift in response to the pressure they are experiencing. And this is where things become even more revealing. Because as the pressure increases, their ability to maintain composure begins to fluctuate. There are moments where they may appear controlled, where they seem to have regained stability. But these moments are often followed by others where that control slips, where reactions become more noticeable, where inconsistencies become more apparent. And this fluctuation is a clear indicator of internal instability, of a dynamic that is no longer fully under control. And this is where your awareness allows you to see beyond the surface, to recognize that what may appear stable in one moment is not consistent across time. And that inconsistency is what confirms the underlying reality. Because true stability does not fluctuate under pressure. It remains consistent. It remains aligned. And when that alignment is missing, it becomes visible through patterns that cannot be sustained. And this is why your position remains so powerful. Because you are not relying on isolated moments to form your understanding. You are observing the pattern as a whole. You are recognizing how each piece connects, how each reaction contributes to the larger picture. And this holistic view is what gives you clarity that is not easily shaken, because it is based on consistency rather than assumption. And as this continues to unfold, you begin to see that the breakdown you are witnessing is not something you need to create. It is something that happens naturally when pressure meets instability, when awareness meets concealment, when clarity meets illusion. And this is where your mad heart becomes a steady anchor, because it allows you to remain grounded while everything around you is shifting. It allows you to maintain your perspective without being pulled into the fluctuations, without being influenced by the temporary moments of control that may appear. And this stability is what ensures that your understanding continues to deepen, continues to refine, continues to align with what is actually happening rather than what is being presented. And this is where your growth becomes even more evident, because you are no longer reacting to surface-level behavior. You are interpreting underlying patterns. You are no longer seeking immediate answers. You are allowing clarity to develop over time. And this shift in approach is what separates you from those who are still caught in the dynamic. Because while they are focused on managing individual moments, you are focused on understanding the entire pattern. And that perspective is what gives you an advantage that cannot be easily countered, because it is not based on what is being shown. It is based on what is being revealed through consistency, through repetition, through the inability to maintain alignment under pressure. And as you continue to hold this position, as you continue to observe without interfering, you will find that the breakdown becomes more visible, not necessarily to everyone, but to those who are paying attention, to those who are capable of seeing beyond the surface. And this visibility is not something that needs to be announced. It does not need to be pointed out. It exists in the pattern itself, in the accumulation of moments that, when viewed together, create a clear and undeniable picture. And this is where your role remains unchanged. You continue to move with awareness, with composure, with intention, allowing the situation to unfold without forcing it, trusting that what needs to be revealed will be revealed, not because you demand it, but because it cannot remain hidden under the conditions that now exist. And that is where your true strength lies, not in controlling the outcome, but in understanding it, not in forcing clarity, but in recognizing it as it emerges. And as this process continues, you will find that what once felt uncertain becomes clear, what once felt hidden becomes visible, And what once required effort to understand becomes something you simply see, naturally, consistently, and without doubt. And as this quiet unraveling continues, and the inconsistencies you have been observing begin to form a clearer and more undeniable pattern, you start to notice something even more profound taking place. Something that does not rely on confrontation, does not depend on exposure, and does not require your involvement at all. And that is the way truth begins to push its way to the surface on its own. Because there is a natural tension that exists between what is real and what is constructed. And the longer something is maintained through control, through omission, through carefully managed perception, the more pressure builds beneath it. And this pressure does not remain hidden indefinitely. It seeks release. It seeks expression. It seeks alignment with what is actually true. And this is where your position becomes even more powerful. Because by choosing not to interfere, by choosing not to force anything into the light prematurely, you have allowed this natural process to take place without disruption. And this is what gives truth the space it needs to emerge fully. Not partially, not selectively, but in a way that reflects the full scope of what has been concealed. And this is where your mad heart demonstrates a deeper level of understanding, because it recognizes that forcing truth can sometimes limit it, can sometimes reduce it to a moment rather than allowing it to unfold as a pattern. And patterns are far more difficult to deny, far more difficult to dismiss, far more difficult to control, because they reveal consistency over time. And consistency is what transforms suspicion into certainty. And as this process continues, you begin to see how every attempt to maintain control, every effort to manage perception, every action taken to prevent exposure actually contributes to the very thing they are trying to avoid. Because in trying to control the narrative, they introduce more variables, more actions, more statements that must align perfectly in order to sustain the illusion. And under pressure, that level of alignment becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. And this is where the truth begins to surface. Not in a single moment, but in a series of moments that, when viewed together, create a picture that cannot be easily explained away. And this is why your patience has been so important, because it has allowed you to see the full scope of what is happening, rather than reacting to isolated incidents. And this full scope is what gives you clarity that is not easily shaken, because it is based on accumulation, on observation over time, on the recognition of patterns that repeat, that align, that confirm each other. And as this clarity deepens, you begin to feel a shift within yourself as well. A shift from questioning to understanding, from uncertainty to confidence, from observation to quiet knowing. And this knowing does not need to be expressed outwardly. It does not need to be validated by others. It exists within you as a result of everything you have seen, everything you have processed, everything you have allowed to unfold without interference. And this internal shift is what further stabilizes your position, because you are no longer seeking answers. You are recognizing them. You are no longer trying to interpret what is happening. You are understanding it as it reveals itself. And this understanding changes how you move, how you respond, how you engage with the situation. Because you are no longer reacting to uncertainty. You are responding from clarity. And this clarity is what gives you a sense of control, not over others, but over your own direction, your own decisions, your own actions. And this is where your mad heart becomes a guiding force, something that allows you to navigate the situation with precision, with awareness, with a level of confidence that does not rely on external confirmation. And as this continues to unfold, you begin to see that the truth does not need your help to emerge. It does not need to be forced. It does not need to be pushed into the light. It simply needs space, time, and the absence of interference. And this is what you have provided, whether intentionally or not. You have created an environment where the truth can no longer remain contained, where the pressure has reached a point where it must be released. And this release is what you are witnessing now, in the form of behavior that becomes more revealing, in the form of actions that no longer align perfectly, in the form of moments where control slips just enough to expose what lies beneath. And each of these moments adds to the overall picture. Each of these moments confirms what you have already understood. And this confirmation is what strengthens your position, because it removes doubt. It removes hesitation. It replaces uncertainty with clarity. And as this clarity becomes more established, you begin to move differently. Not in a way that is reactive or confrontational, but in a way that reflects your understanding, your awareness, your confidence in what you know. And this shift is what further influences the dynamic. Because now, your presence is not just aware, it is certain. It is grounded in understanding. It is no longer searching for answers, it already holds them. And that certainty is what makes it even more difficult for others to maintain control. Because uncertainty can be manipulated. It can be redirected. It can be influenced. But certainty, especially when it is silent and unshaken, creates a level of pressure that cannot be easily managed. And this is where the process accelerates. Because as the truth continues to surface, as the inconsistencies become more visible, as the patterns become more clear, the ability to maintain the illusion diminishes. And this is not something you need to force. It is something that happens naturally when the conditions are no longer sustainable. And this is where your role remains the same. You continue to observe, to understand, to move with awareness rather than reaction, trusting that what needs to be revealed will be revealed, not because you demand it, but because it cannot remain hidden under the pressure that now exists. And this is where your strength becomes even more evident. Because you are not driven by the need to control the outcome. You are guided by your understanding of the process, by your recognition that truth, when given the space to emerge, will do so in a way that is complete, in a way that is undeniable, in a way that does not require your intervention to be recognized. And as this realization settles within you, you begin to see that your power was never in exposing anything. It was in understanding it, in allowing it to unfold, in trusting that clarity would come not through force, but through observation, through patience, through the natural progression of events. And this understanding is what allows you to remain steady, to remain grounded, to move forward without being pulled into the fluctuations of the situation. Because you are no longer reacting to what is happening. You are understanding why it is happening. And that perspective is what gives you an advantage that cannot be easily challenged. Because it is not based on external validation, it is based on internal clarity. And as long as you remain aligned with that clarity, as long as you continue to trust what you have observed, what you have understood, what has been revealed to you through consistency and pattern, you will continue to move with a level of confidence and awareness that ensures you are not only prepared for what comes next, but already positioned to navigate it with precision, with control, and with a quiet certainty that does not need to be proven, because it is already established within you. And as this clarity continues to solidify within you, as the patterns you have observed become undeniable, and the truth that once felt subtle now feels grounded and certain, there is another shift that begins to take place. One that is not just about what you see, but about how you move. Because you are no longer in the same position you once were. You are no longer reacting, no longer trying to understand, no longer searching for confirmation. You have transitioned into something far more powerful. A state of control that does not come from dominance or force, but from awareness, from understanding, from the ability to see clearly and choose your actions with intention rather than impulse. And this is where your mad heart reveals one of its most refined forms, not just as something that endures or observes, but as something that leads your movement, that guides your decisions, that allows you to navigate situations with a level of precision that others may not even recognize. And this transition is subtle, but significant, because it changes everything about how you engage with the world. You are no longer pulled into dynamics that once required your attention. You are no longer influenced by behaviors that once triggered reactions. You are no longer operating within the same framework that others are still trying to maintain. Instead, you are positioned outside of it, observing it, understanding it, and choosing how and when to engage. And this positioning is what gives you control. Not control over others, but control over your own presence, your own energy, your own direction. And this is where your strength becomes even more evident. Because you are no longer dependent on what others say or do to determine your response. You are guided by what you know, by what you have seen, by what has been consistently revealed to you through observation and understanding. And this internal guidance is what stabilizes you. It is what allows you to remain composed, even when situations around you become unpredictable. It is what allows you to maintain clarity, even when others are reacting from confusion. And this is where your movement becomes intentional, because you are no longer acting out of habit, out of expectation, out of emotional reaction. You are acting with awareness, with purpose, with a clear understanding of what aligns with your position and what does not. And this is where the dynamic shifts even further, because people begin to notice that you are no longer engaging in the same way, that you are no longer available to be drawn into the same patterns, that your responses are no longer predictable. And this unpredictability, combined with your awareness, creates a level of pressure that is difficult for others to manage, because they can no longer rely on the same strategies, the same behaviors, the same approaches that once worked. And this is where your control becomes even more apparent. Not because you are asserting it, but because it is reflected in how you move, in how you respond, in how you choose your actions. And this is where your mad heart continues to guide you, not through force, but through alignment, through the ability to recognize what serves your growth and what does not, what aligns with your understanding and what contradicts it. And this recognition is what informs your decisions. It is what shapes your direction. It is what ensures that your movement is consistent with what you know to be true. And as this continues to develop, you begin to see that control is not about controlling external circumstances. It is about maintaining internal alignment regardless of what is happening around you. It is about ensuring that your actions reflect your understanding, that your responses reflect your awareness, that your presence remains grounded even when the environment is not. And this is where your strength becomes something that cannot be easily disrupted, because it is not dependent on stability in the external world. It is rooted in stability within yourself. And this internal stability is what allows you to move through different situations without losing your center, without being pulled into reactions that do not serve you, without being influenced by behaviors that are not aligned with your understanding. And this is where your advantage becomes clear, because while others are still navigating the situation from within it, trying to manage it, trying to control it, trying to respond to it in ways that maintain their position, you are navigating it from a place of perspective, from a place of awareness, from a place of control that is not tied to the outcome, but to your alignment with what you know. And this perspective is what allows you to see beyond the immediate, beyond the surface, beyond the reactions that may seem significant in the moment, but are part of a larger pattern. And this larger pattern is what continues to guide you, what continues to inform your movement, what continues to reinforce your understanding. And as you continue to trust this, as you continue to move in alignment with it, your confidence deepens, not in a way that needs to be expressed outwardly, but in a way that stabilizes your internal state, that reinforces your sense of direction, that allows you to move forward without hesitation, without doubt, without the need to seek validation from others. And this is where your mad heart becomes not just a source of strength, but a source of leadership. Not in the sense of leading others directly, but in the sense of leading yourself, of guiding your own actions, of determining your own path based on your understanding rather than external influence. And this self-leadership is what defines your position now. Because you are no longer reacting to the environment, you are navigating it. You are no longer influenced by the actions of others. You are informed by them. You are no longer part of the dynamic in the same way. You are observing it, understanding it, and choosing how to engage with it based on your alignment. And this is where your growth becomes fully visible. Not necessarily to everyone, but to those who are capable of recognizing it. Because there is something unmistakable about someone who has moved from reaction to control, from uncertainty to clarity, from participation to perspective. And that transformation is what sets you apart. It is what allows you to move through situations with a level of awareness and precision that others may not fully understand, but will always feel. And as you continue to embody this, as you continue to refine this balance between awareness and action, between observation and movement, you will find that your path becomes clearer. Your decisions become more aligned. Your presence becomes more grounded. And this is not because the external world has changed, but because you have. You have shifted into a position where your understanding guides you, where your awareness supports you, where your mad heart leads you. And that is where your true power lies. Not in controlling what happens around you, but in controlling how you move within it, consistently, intentionally, and with a level of clarity that ensures you remain aligned with who you are becoming. And as this position of awareness and control continues to anchor you, as your movement becomes more intentional, and your responses more aligned with what you know rather than what you feel in the moment, there comes a stage where the dynamic reaches a point it can no longer sustain itself in private, where what has been unfolding beneath the surface begins to spill into spaces that are visible to others. Not because you forced it, not because you exposed anything, but because the pressure that has been building can no longer be contained. And this is where another shift takes place. One that confirms everything you have observed without requiring you to say a single word. Because now, the inconsistencies, the reactions, the misalignments that you have been quietly noticing begin to appear in ways that others can see as well. And this is often how truth completes its emergence. Not in isolation, not in hidden corners, but in environments where it can no longer be controlled, where it can no longer be managed in the same way, where the effort required to maintain the illusion exceeds the ability to sustain it. And this is where their behavior becomes more visible, more reactive, more difficult to contain. Because the internal pressure they have been managing is now interacting with external circumstances. And this interaction creates moments that cannot be carefully edited, cannot be perfectly aligned, cannot be easily explained away. And these moments are what reveal everything. not through direct exposure, but through the accumulation of actions that no longer match the narrative they have been trying to maintain. And this is where your mad heart remains steady. Because while the situation becomes more visible, more dynamic, more open, your position does not change. You do not shift into reaction. You do not step into confrontation. You remain in alignment with what you have already understood, allowing the unfolding to continue without interference. And this consistency is what ensures that your clarity remains intact, that your perspective remains grounded, that your movement remains intentional. And this is where the contrast becomes undeniable. Because while others may begin to notice what is happening, while they may start to question, to observe, to interpret the situation based on what they can now see, you are already ahead of that process. You have already moved through the stages of uncertainty, observation, and understanding. And this is what gives you a level of stability that others may not yet have. Because you are not reacting to new information. You are recognizing the continuation of what you have already seen. And this recognition is what allows you to remain composed, to remain focused, to remain aligned with your path even as the environment around you becomes more active. And this is where your strength becomes even more apparent. Not because you are doing anything different, but because you are not changing in response to what is happening. You are maintaining your position, your awareness, your control. And that consistency is what defines your presence, because it shows that your understanding was not dependent on external confirmation. It was already established, already grounded, already guiding your movement. And as this continues to unfold, as the visibility of the situation increases, you begin to see how everything connects, how the patterns you observed in private now align with what is being revealed in public, how the inconsistencies you noticed now become more obvious to others, how the pressure that was once internal now manifests externally. And this alignment is what confirms the process. It shows that what you understood was not isolated, not imagined, not incomplete, but part of a larger dynamic that is now fully revealing itself. And this is where your confidence becomes even more stable, because it is no longer based solely on your own observation. It is reinforced by what is now visible, by what is now undeniable. And this reinforcement does not change your position. It strengthens it. It deepens your understanding. It solidifies your awareness. And this is where your mad heart continues to guide you. Not by pushing you into action, but by reminding you to remain aligned, to remain grounded, to continue moving with intention rather than reaction. Because even as things become more visible, the temptation to engage, to respond, to step into the situation more directly may arise. But your strength lies in your ability to maintain your position, to recognize that the process is already unfolding as it needs to, that your involvement is not required for the truth to be seen. And this recognition is what allows you to move forward without being pulled into the dynamics that are now becoming more apparent. Because you understand that your role was never to expose, never to confront, never to prove, but to see, to understand, to align yourself with what is real, and to move accordingly. And this is where your growth reaches another level. Because you are no longer defined by the situation. You are no longer influenced by how it unfolds. You are operating from a place that is independent of it, from a place that is guided by your own awareness, your own understanding, your own alignment. And this independence is what allows you to move forward with clarity, to make decisions that are not influenced by the noise, the reactions, the visibility of what is happening, but by your own internal guidance. And as you continue to do this, you begin to see that everything that is unfolding is simply a continuation of what you have already recognized, a natural progression of a process that began the moment you became aware. And this perspective is what keeps you grounded, what keeps you focused, what keeps you aligned with your path. Because you are no longer reacting to what is new. You are understanding what is consistent. And this consistency is what allows you to move forward with confidence, with clarity, with a level of control that is not dependent on the outcome, but on your alignment with what you know. And this is where your mad heart reveals its full strength. Not in how it reacts to the situation, but in how it remains steady through it, how it continues to guide you, how it allows you to navigate everything that is unfolding without losing your center, without losing your clarity, without losing your direction. And that is what truly sets you apart. Not what is being revealed around you, but how you remain aligned within it, consistently, intentionally, and with a level of awareness that ensures you continue moving forward, regardless of what is happening externally. Because your path is no longer determined by what others do. It is determined by what you understand and how you choose to move with that understanding. And as everything settles into its final form, as the tension that once existed beneath the surface has now revealed itself in ways that no longer require interpretation, you begin to understand something with a level of clarity that changes how you see not just this situation, but yourself within it. Because what has unfolded was never about proving anything. It was never about confrontation, and it was never about forcing truth into the light. It was about awareness, about recognizing what was already there, about trusting what you sensed even when it was not yet visible to others. And now that everything has aligned, now that what was once hidden has revealed itself through its own weight, you can see that your role was never to chase the truth. It was to hold it, to understand it, to allow it to guide you without needing to validate it through external reaction. And this realization shifts everything, because you are no longer looking at what happened as something you had to control or fix. You are seeing it as something that unfolded naturally once you stepped into clarity. And that clarity is what gave you your advantage. Not because it allowed you to act, but because it allowed you not to react. It allowed you to remain grounded while everything else moved. It allowed you to stay aligned while others became unstable. And that alignment is what defines your strength, because it shows that your power was never in what you said or did. It was in how you understood, how you observed, how you chose to move without being pulled into dynamics that were never meant for you. And as you carry this forward, as you move beyond this moment and into what comes next, you take with you something far more valuable than resolution. You take with you a deeper awareness of how truth operates, how pressure reveals, how silence can be more powerful than reaction. And this awareness becomes part of how you navigate everything moving forward. It becomes the foundation of your decisions, the guide for your interactions, the standard for your alignment. And this is where your mad heart proves its true nature, not as something chaotic or unpredictable, but as something precise, something grounded, something capable of holding clarity even when everything else is uncertain. And that is what ensures that no matter where you go from here, no matter what situations you encounter, you will not need to force understanding. You will not need to chase answers, because you have already developed the ability to see, to recognize, and to move accordingly. And that is what sets you apart. Not the situation itself, but how you remained within it, steady, aware, and aligned. And that is something no one can take from you, because it was built through experience, through observation, through the choice to trust what you know, even when it was not yet visible. And now that it is, you can move forward without hesitation, without doubt, and without the need to look back, because everything has already shown you exactly what you needed to see.